Ladies and gentlemen, we've been asked to see if we could persuade you to move up a little bit so that the speaker feels a little bit more at home. So if you're sitting near the back, if you wouldn't mind, no pressure, or maybe just a little bit of pressure to move up a little bit so that we feel a little closer to one another and feel more at home. Thank you very much. Somebody moved from the last row to the second last row. Yes, your koach. Thank you all. The power of persuasion. Very good. So, ladies and gentlemen, friends, Erev Tov, good evening, and thank you all for being with us here. I'm Rabbi Carney Rose of Shaarey Zedek. I'm so delighted to welcome all of you this evening into our beautiful sanctuary. Tonight we have the distinct pleasure to continue our dedication and commitment and support for Medinat Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, the Jewish people the world over. And we're blessed tonight to have Yaron Deckel here from the Jewish Agency for Israel. Many of you know that Yaron is an influential Israeli journalist and a broadcaster celebrated for his deep understanding of Middle East politics as well as diplomacy. Having interviewed numerous world leaders and served as CEO and editor-in-chief of Galei Tzahal, an Israeli popular radio station, his extensive experience in journalism and international relations has made him a trusted voice in a complicated time in a complicated region. Yaron is known for his insightful analysis and ability to articulate complex geopolitical issues in a clear and accessible manner, earning him widespread recognition and tremendous respect from many. He is a winner of the Sokolov Award, the most prestigious journalism award in Israel. Today, Yaron is the head of the Jewish Agency mission in Canada. We had a chance to spend some time with him yesterday. It was delightful. He is wise, he is experienced, and I think he's really a mensch. So we're going to enjoy hearing him tonight share with us some thoughts. A warm Winnipeg welcome on a cold night to Yaron Deckel of the Jewish Agency. Pleasure.
Good evening, everybody. Glad to be here in Winnipeg for the fourth time since I arrived to Canada 4 years ago. And you have a wonderful country, to be honest. I've had the pleasure to travel all over Canada. And instead of telling my bio, I produced a short clip about myself. I used to be a journalist before coming here, and journalists are never modest. So this is a clip about my short history before coming to Canada, and the reason why I decided to put journalism aside and to come and do some work with Jewish communities in this wonderful country. So if we can watch the clip, it will be great.
בוש מקבל אותנו בחוותו רחבת הידיים בטקסס. I'm Yaron from the Israeli television.
Yeah, Yaron, how are you?
Thank you very much for hosting us here.
This is Barney.
The disengagement might lead not to more security, but on the contrary, to more violence.
Now is an opportunity for the Palestinians to show leadership.
Then the question, Mr. President, is do you criticize Israel of being there, and you criticize Israel of getting out of there?
No, I think Israel did well to withdraw from Gaza.
האם מר רבין אינך חוזר על אותה טעות כיום?
אני חושב שאנחנו חיים בתקופה של הזדמנות היסטורית.
I have always wanted to be a journalist, to witness social and political processes from close up, to observe fateful events from close quarters.
Joining me now is Yaron Deckel. He's considered by many to be one of Israel's top political reporters and commentators. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
While still a soldier, working as a reporter for the popular IDF radio network, Galei Tzahal, I followed closely political events in the country and around the world as they were unfolding.
ואם אני אקרא את כל הפרשנים, ירון דקל למשל וכדומה, שכל היום נותן לי ציונים, אם אני עוזב את הממשלה, לא עוזב את הממשלה. אתה חושב, ירון, שאני אתחשב בדעתך? תמות חמורה. טעות חמורה.
I found it fascinating being present where decisive events were happening, reporting rolling news and delivering analysis of dramatic, often complex events to millions of listeners and viewers.
מדינת ישראל הדיחה את ראש הממשלה שלה.
יהיה לו לאהוד ברק בהחלט הרבה בעיות. אני רק שואל.
לא, אתה לא שואל, תסלח לי.
שמעתי ברדיו פרשן פוליטי מאוד בכיר שדיבר על כך שיש מבוכה בליכוד. הפרשן הוא דווקא מהידועים והמכובדים, אני עוד לא מזהה אותו פה, אבל שם.
These include some highly charged landmark events, such as conducting the last interview with the late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin shortly before he was assassinated.
שישראל עומדת מול אויבים קשים.
Since then, Israel's social landscape has undergone numerous transformations.
השבוע עם ירון דקל.
ערב טוב לכם ושבת שלום. ממשלה חדשה יצאה השבוע לדרך, ממשלת בנט-לפיד. חבלי הלידה היו בידוע קשים מאוד, ירדנה מאוד שנויה.
I was there to bring the news and the views. I covered anything from the protests of Israelis of Ethiopian origin and all the way to the ongoing Jewish-Arab conflict.
אין אחריות של הרוב כלפי המיעוט שהוא חי בתוכו.
To sort all this out, I'm joined by two distinguished journalists from the region, Yaron Deckel, Washington Bureau Chief for Israeli Television, and Saeed Arikat.
My posting as the U.S. correspondent for Israel Broadcasting Authority afforded me a glimpse into an entirely new world.
את הפרויקט הזה בלב ליבה של צ'יינאטאון אפשר לראות גם בקונטקסט האמריקאי רחב יותר. מעמד של קהילה יהודית להתחבר למורשת שלה לעברה.
It also brought me closer to the Jewish communities of North America.
Make sure, is that her? I don't want to have what happened to Jacob.
It is a vast, complex, and fascinating world.
My heart is probably in Israel. Every single day it's a struggle between the head and the heart.
I completed my 5-year Washington stint spellbound. I later followed the Jewish trail around the world, Argentina, South Africa and Russia.
סטלין החליט להקים מחוז יהודי, אבל ללא דת. הרוב המכריע של העולים מדרום אפריקה נשארים בארץ. 5,000 יהודים יש באל פאסו, 5,000 בסך הכל.
And each time I returned enthralled.
We are who we are, and we have our history to prove who we are.
The more I discovered, the more convinced I became that my role was not just to report and commentate. My role, I felt, was also to do, to apply my experience and expertise in order to enhance the bond between Israel and Jewish communities around the world. And that's the reason I decided to join the Jewish Agency. After all, and despite everything, we are a single people with a shared destiny.
תודה רבה לכם על הצפייה. לילה טוב, שבת שלום, מירושלים.
As I promised, it's not a humble video clip. I warned before that it's not going to be as such, but this is what I did before coming to Canada. And since I arrived in September 2021, a little bit over 4 years ago, I had a pleasure to travel in all 10 provinces and one territory. Who has been to all 10 provinces? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 10 provinces and a territory. 1, 2, 3, 2.5. All 3 territories and all 10 provinces. Wow. Unbelievable. So what I found, and I traveled not only to see the Jews, also to meet the bears. And I looked at our friend in ChatGPT to check how many Jews are in Canada. Anybody knows the number? What's the size of the Jewish community in Canada? 400,000. And the number of bears? It's also 400,000. But the bears are not Jews. It's a different community. Anyway, you have a really wonderful, wonderful country. The only slight issue is the cold. A slight issue, mainly for those who most of their lives lived in Tel Aviv, which the 12 degrees is a disaster. Plus, 12 degrees is a real nightmare for people who live in Tel Aviv. But it's great being here, and I love traveling. That's the reason I try to meet as many communities as I can when I'm in Canada. I've been here a couple of times before for different occasions. And this year, we are very proud to have, for the first time of the Jewish Agency, the two Shinshinim. Where is Ron and Yam? Can you raise? Yes. So this wonderful congregation, and I'd like to thank President Fanny for doing it, and Rabbi Rose for supporting it, and Tali for being the supervisor of Yam and Ron, who are doing an amazing work here in Winnipeg. For the first time, we have Shinshinim. Shinshinim are volunteers before, it's a gap year in Israel, before going to the army service, which is a mandatory in Israel. They serve in different communities, and it's a historic event to have Shinshinim here, and I'm so proud of this congregation that decided to go for it. It's an effort, it's not easy, but I think you really, really enjoy the presence of Ron and Yam, and to be continued. Every year we have different Shinshinim. This year we have in Canada 32 Shinshinim at the age of 18 to 19, serving not only in Winnipeg, but also in Montreal, in Toronto, and in Vancouver, 32 of them. And I'd like to speak a little bit about the situation in back there in the Middle East and in Israel, and then open for questions you might have. But before I start sharing some of my own experiences, I want to say one word about the work we do here. The Jewish Agency was known for many, many years of making the process of aliyah, of immigration to Israel in the 50s, 60s, 70s, still going on. But the main issue we deal with is to connect the people in the diaspora to the people in Israel. Because we know that the young generation is less connected than the older generation, and there is a work need to be done to make the connections and to have the relationship with the State of Israel, which is the center of the Jewish world. And we know the Jewish world is a small world, and among 8.7 or 9 billion people around the globe, the Jewish community is only 14 to 15 million, which is 0.2%. It's a very, very small, and if we don't make effort to be one people and support each other, it will be more difficult. So that's what we do here in different layers and programs, and that's the reason why I decided to put the journalism aside for a while and to come to work with communities here in this wonderful country, Canada, and different provinces, different communities, and different federations. And I'm very grateful that the CEO of Winnipeg Federation, Jeff, is here with us. Thank you very much for coming and for the work you are doing here in Winnipeg, and also with the connection in Israel. We met many times in different delegations in Israel, which is really appreciated. And I want to take you for a little journey with 4 events from the past and from the near the near and the far past from my experience as a journalist and as an emissary here in Canada, and tell you about it from my own perspective, and that will lead us to this situation right now in the Middle East and where it goes to. The first experience was on November 4th, 1995. November 4th, 1995, there was a rally in Tel Aviv to support the peace process led by Prime Minister Rabin. It was a very successful rally at that time. Rabin was hesitant to initiate the rally. He was concerned that people might not come, but it was a huge and amazing turnout. And at the end of the rally, as a reporter, I was looking for an angle for the morning radio morning show. And then I said, okay, I'll try to make an interview with the Prime Minister, and the Foreign Minister at that time was Shimon Peres and Prime Minister Rabin. I came to the podium at the end of the rally, and he was he was happy to give an interview, not a long interview, like a couple of minutes, for radio. We used to have a big tape recorder at that time. We are talking 1995. So I was very happy to have this interview, and I walked home. I was leaving 15 minutes walk from the square. And November in Israel is not November in Manitoba, so you can walk home. And I got a message on my pager. At that time, we didn't have the smartphones, cell phones, but now recently we heard about the pager in Lebanon again, all the pagers, and the message was clear. There were shots at the square, please go back. So I rushed to the square, and I learned immediately that the Prime Minister was shot, so I physically ran to the nearby hospital, which is the Ichilov Hospital, the main hospital of Tel Aviv City, and after an hour and a half, the announcement came that the Prime Minister died out of the wounds of the 3 shots by the assassination that night on November 4th. And I realized that my interview was the last interview that he gave in his lifetime, 10 minutes before the assassination. And this is an event I remember. Recently we marked the 30th anniversary of the assassination, and then that night I was one of the last people to meet the Prime Minister, and this was the last interview he gave in his lifetime. And we put it on air almost every year since then. And it was a dark time in the history of Israel with lots of, it was a shock and a grief and misunderstanding of the situation, what kind of world are we living in. And this is will ever be part of our history, but also part of my own journalistic work. And then I want to move to November 2023, a month after the atrocities in Israel. I was with the Canadian mission coming to visit as a support. The Canadian community was one of the first communities around the world to send delegations from here to Israel. It was a cross-country delegation, including members of federal parliament in Ottawa, a few members, and we visited the Gaza envelope. It was 1 month after the atrocities. Everything was very, very fresh, and the emotions in Israel were very. The trauma was. You could have felt the trauma. You couldn't hear people laughing. People didn't use their horn when they drove the car. Everything was slow motion and quiet, and you felt the depression at that time. It reminded me when I was a kid after the Yom Kippur War in 1973. It was the same traumatic feeling and shock. And in Kfar Aza, Kibbutz Kfar Aza, which is in the Gaza envelope, we went into one of the apartments, small apartment, very modest apartment, of a young couple, 24 years old, Naor and Sivan, whom apparently, they both were murdered, whom apparently I discovered there that I was in their wedding a few years earlier because she was a daughter of a colleague of mine from the media. So he invited me to their wedding. So I was in their wedding. It was very, very sad because there were some graffiti from the rescue team. Be careful because there is still human remains in the apartment, and it was full of bullet holes all over the apartment. So you could have just imagined what kind of a massacre was going on there. And recently, the Kfar Aza kibbutz and other kibbutzim made a decision to rebuild and come back to live where they are there to stay, not to leave, which is very important part of the. Then nobody will destroy the Jewish spirit. So this visit in their apartment is also something that I carry with me. And in the last visit in Israel, 2 months ago, I went to visit a place where it was struck by a missile from Iran in the small city of Bat Yam, on a suburb of Tel Aviv, where 9 people were killed, but 2,000 people were displaced because of the blast. And you see, it's really a shock to see what the damage it could cause. Luckily, Israel was able to intercept most of the missiles, but still there were 29 casualties in the 12 days of war with Iran. And visiting Bat Yam also got a kind of a reminder which neighborhood we live. The day after, I visited the city of Sderot. The city of Sderot is in Gaza envelope, is the largest city next to Gaza, 40,000 people around, or 38,000. And most of them came back, almost 100%. And I was happy to be surprised that they built new neighborhoods because people want to come and live there. So I left the region with much more optimism than I came to visit the city of Sderot, because people believe in living in Gaza envelope, the people believe in the future of the city, and the cost of living is more reasonable than living in a big city, and we know it from all over the world, including Canada. Tel Aviv and Jerusalem are more expensive, the south, but people also come because of ideology, because of Zionism, because of their spirit and the feeling that it's good to be back and to express the fact that we are there to stay. And no atrocities, and no murders, and no evil of any terror organization in the south and in the north will destroy or influence the Israeli/Jewish spirit. And the Jewish world came as a support for the Israelis just after October 7th, and after that, with lots of appreciation of the Israelis, because they know and they saw and they've learned, and they reports coming from all over the world, including Canada, about the work being done by Jewish communities all over the world to support Israel at the time of need. The war ended recently with a ceasefire in both fronts, in the north with the Hezbollah, a proxy of Iran, and in the south. And the 3 main enemies didn't give up. We should put it on the table. And this is a reason to be concerned that the Hamas on the south, the Hezbollah at the north, and the Iranians, they still didn't give up and didn't surround her as we hope they should. Or once they are defeated, they will wave a white flag. So this is one reason to be concerned, because they are still there. And the Lebanese government is trying to disarm the Hezbollah, but the Lebanese government is too weak to do that. So the Hezbollah, unlike the Hamas, is an organization that kidnapped a state. It's a terrorist organization that has a state. Unlike the Hamas, which is a smaller terrorist organization, but doesn't have a state. So the Hezbollah is there. This is a few reasons to be troubled by. On the southern front, the Hamas is not going to volunteer to disarm itself, despite the push and the hope of the American administration, which came up to help Israel with the hostages, and I'll touch it in a minute. But the Hamas is still there, and the Hamas, which is weaker, still wants to hold the guns. And we do hope that they don't plan another October 7th for the years to come. They don't have the capacity. Israel keeps 53% of Gaza Strip to protect all the people who come back to Sderot and to the Gaza envelope. But Hamas controls the population of 2 million people in 47% of the territory. So this is another reason to be concerned. And Iran, which was had 12 days of war with Israel, still has a dream of a nuclear weapon in the future. It's more difficult, more challenging, and also rebuilding the missiles that they lost during the war. So these are three reasons to be concerned. But as an Israeli who follows the news, as a journalist in the past, there are other good reasons, I think, to be even more optimistic. And I want to share with you why I'm feeling more optimistic, despite the fact that there are reasons to be concerned. This is not Norway and Sweden, this area, and even not Canada and Trump, with all the Trump, but still the long border between Canada and the United States is a safe border. And those who have nexus can travel easily without having troubles. And nexus, Trump didn't cancel the nexus yet with Canada, luckily. But we don't have a nexus when we travel to two countries we can cross the border with, Jordan and Egypt. And I do see a couple of reasons to be optimistic. And when I talk about Egypt and Jordan, I was a kid when President Sadat came to Israel. It was 4 years after the terrible war of Yom Kippur of 1973. And there was kind of a feeling, people were, before he came over to Israel, people were not sure if it's not a trick. Even the Army Chief of Staff, the Israeli Army Chief of Staff, said that it might be a trick of a guerrilla, Egyptian guerrilla, who will come in an airplane of the Egyptian president. They will get out of the plane and they shoot all the leadership of Israel. The Army Chief of Staff warned it might be a trick because he didn't believe that President Sadat might come 4 years after the same president initiate the toughest war against Israel on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, on Yom Kippur at 2 p.m. Israel time with Syria. And we should remember 2,700 Israeli soldiers were killed in that war, in Yom Kippur War. And he came over, and it was like an electric fire in the air when he came over to Israel. And 2 years later, it was peace was signed between the two countries, and the peace will mark this century in 5 years. It's already 45 years, but it's going to be 50 years of a peace between Israel and Egypt. And in 1994, Jordan joined Egypt, and we have a safe border with Jordan, the longest border Israel has, for almost 30 years, which is most of the time quiet. And I had the pleasure to take my car from Tel Aviv and drive to Amman once. You have to change the plate of the car for a Jordanian plate, but you can cross the border safely and travel in Jordan. something that we couldn't imagine when I was a kid that it will happen. So there are a few reasons to be optimistic. First, I mentioned the Iran. Iran lost its capability to protect Tehran because Israel destroyed all the batteries. Israel destroyed most of the missiles and also the factories of missiles, the ballistic missiles of Iran. It doesn't mean that they cannot reproduce it and retry to make it, but they were shocked by the fact that the Israeli intelligence knew exactly how to get and kill the leadership of the army and the Revolutionary Guard in their home, in their bedroom, to launch a missile to the bedroom of the head of the Revolutionary Guard. You need a very accurate intelligence, not just to steal the archives of Iran as Israel did a few years ago, but also to get to where people exactly which room in the apartment they live in. So they're still under a shock of the way Israel was able to infiltrate into the Iranian top regime. And also, the Air Force of Israel, 1,500 or 1,800 kilometers north of Israel, was able to destroy all the protection of Iran and Tehran was exposed. The Israeli Air Force was able to fly there with no risk and no danger. And it will take them a while to recover psychologically and physically from what Israel did during the 12 days of a war, especially at the first night. So Iran of the end of 2025 is not the same Iran as we know it. And they also know that the US collaborates with Israel. And I think their appetite to try to launch another attack upon Israel is very, very low at the present. So it gives me kind of optimism. The Hezbollah, which is a proxy, hasn't recovered from the attack of Israel during the war, killing the Nasrallah, the Al-Qaeda terrorist, in his bunker, 8 stories down underground, with a missile that got to the leadership of the Hezbollah, again intelligence, but also very effective way. And the fact that they were shocked and they were influenced by the attack, we saw just later on that the same year, when the war between Israel and Iran was going on, the Hezbollah, which is a proxy of the Shiite Iran, was very, very quiet. We were concerned that during the time of a conflict between Israel and Iran, the Hezbollah will be part of the festival. They didn't launch one rocket and one missile because they're still there, but the Hezbollah today is not the same Hezbollah as we knew it before the war. So 2 reasons to be more optimistic on that northern front. Southern front, now another one in the north, Syria. Now the president of Syria is the best buddy of the president of the United States. You know, he was wanted by $10 million for his head. Now he is welcomed in the White House, and the president gives him an aftershave. Did you see the footage that the president of the United States gives some spray on the president of Syria? Unbelievable. So Syria is not going to be in any conflict in the near future. He made the ruler of Syria made a strategic decision to collaborate with the United States and the West. And if you are there, you cannot be an enemy of Israel. It doesn't work both ways. So we have Syria discussing with Israel new arrangements of security, not discussing with Israel peace at the moment. We don't know if he can deliver a peace. Does he control Syria as a whole, or he control parts of Syria? We don't know. But it's we are quite confident that this Syria not going to be an enemy of Israel in the near future. So we have a weak Iran, a very weak Hezbollah, and a cooperative Syria. That's the front. I mentioned the Hamas, that the Hamas is still there, and there is no force, international force, who's going to be able to disarm Hamas, but it's not the same Hamas. They lost their missiles and rockets. They have maybe very, very few. They cannot reproduce it because they lost all the factories. And they cannot smuggle through Egypt all the materials they need to build their machine. Now, obviously, it was a mistake to feed the Hamas with billions of dollars from Qatar during the time before the war, because instead of building a new prosperous Palestinian entity, they used it to build a terror entity, using it to build tunnels, hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, and Israel was not able to destroy most of them during the 2 years, not risking soldiers and not knowing what's the blast or explosive they hide in those tunnels. So there are tunnels, and there are two Gaza Strip. One is overground, and then there is a Gaza Strip underground, which is not the same, but they really use the money, most of the money not to, and they don't care about the lives of people, as we know. They use the Palestinians, they don't care about the lives of Israelis and Jews, as they don't care about the lives of Palestinians, because they use the Palestinians as human shields in hospitals, mosques, and schools. And they built their terror machine under those institutions, thinking that Israel will avoid attacking, knowing, and they will survive, and they will protect their leadership, their terrorists, their arms, their machine of terror, because of their hiding. And this is one of the reasons that there were so many civilians killed, unfortunately, in Gaza, which was not the intention of Israel, but Hamas, they just don't care about human lives in general, because their ideology, this is what they want to achieve. That's the goal, and all prices could be paid for this goal. Who cares who is killed and who is wounded, if it's a Palestinian or an Israeli or a Jew? This is terrorism. Terrorism do not care even sometimes about their own people. So the Hamas is a weak Hamas. It's still there, and it's clear that voluntarily it won't disarm, but it's not the Hamas of October 6th. So if we look at the Middle East, as I see it, the Middle East is much safer today than it was on October 6th. Again, it's not Switzerland, but it's much safer. We see tourists catching up now in Israel from all over the world because there is a ceasefire, and the way to see a situation, in my eyes, is to see the airlines. If airlines fly, because airlines do not want to risk their crews, and they don't want to risk their planes because of the insurance. One of the reasons they stopped flying, even there were crews who didn't mind going for, even not staying on the ground overnight, but the insurance companies, this is a war zone, you will have to pay millions of dollars for insurance, and the companies said, we are not going to pay for that. So most of airlines, except of the Israeli 3 airlines, stopped their service after the war with Iran. Or immediately when it broke, the war with Iran, airlines stopped flying to Israel unless you have a ticket with an Israeli airline, and unfortunately the Israeli airline, the main airline, doesn't fly to Canada, which I think it's a terrible mistake not to fly to Canada when the fourth Jewish community around the world lives in Canada and flies a lot to Israel. And Canadians do visit in Israel more than other communities around the world. Who has a guess how many Americans out of 10 visit in Israel? There was a survey once checking visits in Israel. Someone? 6, 3, 1. 3.3 out of 10. How many Canadians out of 10? 5, 4, 7.8. The Canadian Jewish community, part of its culture is visiting the Jewish homeland, Israel. Not necessarily visiting family members in Ra'anana. Just visiting in Israel as part of the Jewish education. You have to visit Jewish homeland. And the Canadian Jewish community is considered to be one of the most Zionist communities around the globe. And this is one way to check what are we talking about. So more and more tourists come to Israel. And another reason to be optimistic, after I see the surrounding area, there is one country which I have to mention because I'm very optimistic and it gives me more optimism. Who has a guess which country I didn't mention and I have to mention when we talk about the Arab world? Arab country. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia waiting to make a deal with Israel. When will it happen? Is it a matter of weeks or months? We don't know yet. But you should know that already flying to the east from Israel, you can fly over Saudi Arabia, even it's still considered to be an enemy state. It hasn't changed it, but the Saudis allowed Israeli airlines, Indian airlines, other airlines to cut short the travel from Israel to Delhi, to Bangkok, to where do we fly more? Delhi and Bangkok, and to fly over Saudi Arabia. And they gave already a few good signs that they are willing to join the Abraham Accord. Now, they cannot join the Abraham Accord as long as Israel doesn't do more measures towards a peaceful solution in the area. They cannot they cannot jump on the train when war is going on. But, believe me, it's a matter of time. I cannot tell you how long will it take, but I'm sure that I'm sure it could happen during Trump time because he's going to put a lot of pressure and condition on the Saudis to come over. And he will make the most of it when it happens, which means I can see, and I don't know, I'm just imagining, that when the Saudi prince, MBS, decides to make it formal and sign an agreement, President Trump will invite Prime Minister Netanyahu and the prince to Washington, to the White House, and he can invite the president of Egypt and the king of Jordan and all his friends from the Gulf, Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates, which we have, they are signed the peace, and Israelis love flying to Dubai, more than in Canada. There are just 5 flights a day to Dubai from Tel Aviv, non-stop. So think of it for a second. When there is such an event of Israeli Prime Minister and the President of the United States surrounded by Arab leaders signing a peace, what does it tell the world? It's a new era, as we had before, a feeling. And it doesn't mean that every problem is solved and every conflict is settled. But when money talks, and the Saudis and the Americans the American president thinks of money a lot, as we know. When money talks, it could make a change on the ground for the people of Saudi Arabia and of Israel. And I told a few friends that I'm waiting for traveling to Saudi Arabia. And I've been to Egypt, I've been to Jordan. I remember my first time in Cairo airport as a young student, listening that the flight to Tel Aviv is about to leave. My skin was shivering because I remember as a kid, my father went to the front in the artillery forces in Yom Kippur, and I'm here as a student in Cairo airport, and the flight to Tel Aviv is about to leave. That was something that was very emotional, such a short notice on the airport speakers. So Saudi Arabia is waiting, and it will be a strategic change in the region when it happens, because then it was going to be clear that the alliance against the Shiite terrorist state, Iran, or terrorist organization Hezbollah, has Israel and the States and Jordan and Egypt and the Gulf, the Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. The first attack of Iran on Israel, the Saudis were very productive with the UK and with Jordan, with the intelligence of where the missiles are flying, to let the Israelis and some ships from the UK to intercept the missiles on the way, the first attack. The last time it was Israel by itself, but the Saudis made a strategic decision. They are getting out of this circle. They are going to be part of this alliance. If it happens, when it happens, remember our talk, that we talked about it. It's a matter of time. I can't tell you when, but it's going to happen. And we have all the signs that one day we will hear, and I'm sure that President Trump, he might not be the best friend of Canada, but he's going to be very productive in that sense. And he has a major goal. We know what's his goal. Nobel Prize. And to have a Nobel Prize, Nobel Prize of the Peace Nobel Prize, you may have to make a peace. Unless you are Barack Obama and you can get the Nobel Prize for Peace with doing nothing. That also happens. So I think right now in Israel we are focusing on the controversy and the polarization of the society, which is a major conflict within the Israeli society. We are in a year of elections, and our Prime Minister, who is the longest serving Prime Minister in the history of Israel, wants to continue forever. And he is not different than his predecessors. In Israel, prime ministers never leave. They always want to continue. We don't have a formula of a prime minister who says, I've done my thing, and after 10, 15 years, it's time for a younger generation or my successor to take the reins and continue. We don't have our Angela Merkel of Germany and no Tony Blair of the UK. All the prime ministers always wanted to be there forever, as long as some of them lost elections, but they wanted to continue. One got a stroke, but he wanted to continue. One was assassinated. One one died in office. We had one who died naturally from heart attack in the 60s. And even Ben-Gurion wanted to run again and be a prime minister. They always have the feeling, they really believe in it, that nobody can do it better than them. Nobody can get to fit in their shoes. No one in the world, no one in Israel, no one in the Jewish world, just themselves. So we had 13 prime ministers, and we say it's left or right, it doesn't matter. They all have the same feeling that it's nothing but them. And Netanyahu, he's only 76. And his father died at the age of 102. So it's 26 years from now. and he wants to continue for the next 26 years. We have elections. According to the polls, there is a chance that this government might not be able to continue. Israel is a democracy. Elections will take place before October this 2026, so less than a year from now. It's scheduled for October 26, but usually in Israel, elections are not on time, they are earlier, so it will happen either in June or in September. In July and August, usually we are in our mental cottages. We don't have physical cottages, but we are mentally in our cottages, so we don't have elections in July and August. So it's either September or June when the Israelis will go to the polls. And we have a representation, we have a proportional vote for a party, and then the party needs to get a coalition, and the coalition votes for the government and for the prime minister. We are a parliamentary system. As in Canada, we don't vote directly for the Prime Minister of Israel. And as long as they get the approval of the Parliament, 61 out of 120 members of Parliament, they can continue. Netanyahu now is on his 6th term, and he can go as long as he gets the approval of the Parliament. Once he doesn't get the approval, or he decides to quit, which I don't want, the Israeli politics is, when I start covering the Israeli politics, I thought this is a wonderful amusement park, and then I discovered it's more like a Jurassic Park. So I don't want to, I'm not a prophet, and I cannot tell you if he doesn't quit it, but I will be extremely, extremely surprised if he quits. Maybe he's going to court now on a corruption case. Maybe he makes a deal. It seems unlikely, and I had known the prime minister since he came to Israeli politics back in 1988. There was a picture of us in the film, in the clip of me and Netanyahu from 1999. We both were very young then, with lots of hair. I've had lots of talks with him. He is very, very ambitious politician, and a very skilled politician, and he knows how to play the game the best of any of his rivals. He's very controversial, usually, and I can ask you, if we talk about that, one question about food, and please raise your hand. Who likes cilantro? Who hates cilantro? Netanyahu is our cilantro. Either you like it or you hate it. That's there. You cannot have no opinion about the prime minister. Every Israeli knows the best two things. One, better than the soccer coach, how to play, and better than the prime minister, what has to be done. Israelis know the best, either on the field or on politics or policy, they know. And the final word before I open for questions, if you might have, Verena will help me with it. Why am I optimistic? Because of two reasons. One, that we are still in the midst of a crisis. And if we look back, Israel always knew how to get out of crisis. In the 50s, we had not enough food, and we used to have coupons for meat because there was not enough food 67, there was a real danger for the survival of the state of Israel before the 6 Days War with Egypt and Jordan and Syria and Iraq. Iraq, fighting. They sent troops. 73, again, existence of the state of Israel was at stake. And 95 people thought after the assassination of the prime minister that this is the end of democracy in Israel. We tried, it didn't succeed. If the prime minister is being murdered because of his political process after free elections, That's the end of democracy. And Israel came out as a startup nation with a strong economy, prosperous, and with waves of aliyah from all over the world. Usually we have 28 to 29,000 new immigrants every year. Since the war in Ukraine, we had 90,000 from Russia and Ukraine. So it's triple the times usually we have on a single year, 28 to 29,000. So all the time Israel did overcome because of the Israeli spirit and because of the Jewish spirit. And this gives me a lot of hope. We are not done with the crisis. We are at the crisis. We are still in the midst of a crisis. We're not sure how it's going to end. At the end, what's going to happen with the Hamas is there, the Hezbollah is there, and Iran is there. But if we look at the history, we can see that all the time when he had a major crisis, we did know how to overcome. The Israeli spirit and the Jewish spirit, and this gives me a lot of hope. And now I'm willing to take questions, and I asked for questions and not for comments.
Yes.
Please.
Od lo avda tikvatenu, right? Yeah. Our spirit and our hope never ends. I am so grateful that you came and took a stop in Winnipeg, the biggest Zionist center in North America. Right? Yaron, I would like to give you this collector's kippah from our inaugural ceremonies, and I hope that you will talk about Winnipeg when you wear it. So I would ask that you keep it to questions. I know everybody has important things they want to say in a little speech and sermon, but we would like to keep the questions at the forefront. We have Ron and Yam who have microphones who will be able to give you the mic if you would like to ask a question, and I will recognize you, and then you can, I can't recognize you without my glasses. No, I'm good. So they will give you the microphone when you want to speak, and we will take as many questions as possible. What time do we go until, Yaron?
We have like 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. So where would you like to start? Okay, Louis.
Hi.
And then Art.
Very insightful, thank you. Can you just quickly tell us your opinion about Turkey? You never mentioned Turkey, so I'd like to know what you think about Turkey.
That's a little bit over 15 minutes. I'll tell you briefly, Turkey and Qatar are playing dual games. Qatar financed Hamas and hosted the World Cup. And the world agreed that you can finance Hamas and at the same time host the World Cup on soccer, football. We call it football. Turkey can threaten Israel and say that Israel can go to hell in Turkish, and also want to send a peace force being a best buddy of Trump at the same time. And the world agrees to it. So it's very complicated, both countries, both Muslim countries, and Israel is not happy with both. But Israel understands that in the world of today, you don't want to push them to be Iran aligned, Iran kind of best relationship between, or strengthen the relationship between Turkey and Iran and push Qatar towards Iran. So as long as they are welcomed in the White House, the complexity will continue. That's the bottom line. Israel used to have many flights to Turkey, no flights, and the ambassador is back to Jerusalem, so the diplomatic relationship level is very low between Israel and Turkey. But because of the importance of Turkey, Israel doesn't want to break the glass. So it's complex, and it's going to continue as that dual game that both countries play. Unfortunately. Yes.
Thank you. Oh, we had one over here, and then Michael, and then Art.
Thank you. What about Iraq? What do you think is going to happen with it?
Well, Iraq has many problems of domestic problem of itself. Right now, Israel doesn't see, they don't have the money to fuel terrorist organizations, and as it's seen by the intelligence, Iraq right now, and when we talk about Iraq, we talk about, it's not one united Iraq, right? But the administration, the government, is not a hostile government right now, because also they want some money from the West, so they cannot be a terrorist country if they want. Money plays a major game in the Middle East. American money, European money, the pressure of France upon Lebanon was very important to try to push the Hezbollah out of southern Lebanon. So we see that the money also influences countries like Iraq, and right now, luckily, Iraq is not in the risky circle to the state of Israel. Yes?
So Hamas won't disarm. Is there any other alternative but for Israel to make sure that they disarm?
It's a very good question. There is an option of having a long ceasefire when Hamas is not gaining a new ammunition and new missiles and new armory, which we had in the past. After the Second Lebanon War, Hezbollah was there, but it was deterred for 17 years, which is quite a long time. The tourism up north flourished in Israel. Hezbollah was still there, but it was an organization which was deterred after the Second Lebanon War. Even the secretary of the Hezbollah, Nasrallah, said that knowing the consequences of the war, he wouldn't initiate the war. So there is an option that there will be a ceasefire with new measures of protection and defending Israel, different than before October 7th, taken by Israel, for instance, keeping a kilometer or two inside Gaza not to let any invasion from Gaza to Israel, for instance. Things has changed, but there is an option that because disarming Hamas, the question is it possible? Because Israel was fighting Hamas for 2 years, and Hamas still doesn't disarm. Is it an endless war against Hamas, or 2 more years and then Hamas disarmed? Because it's quite clear, as you said, that the international force will not be able to disarm Hamas. Only Israel can try to disarm Hamas. But many Israelis do ask themselves, if it didn't happen in the first 2 years, when it's going to happen? So maybe there will be a long ceasefire with an organization which is much weaker than it was on October 7th. It's a possibility. We have had it with the Hezbollah for a long, long time, over a decade. And it was there. The Lebanese government didn't take over after the Second Lebanon War, unfortunately. We hoped so, because they were part of the agreement between Israel and the international community in 2006. Yes. Next.
Hi. First off, thank you for... I'm going to take my hearing aid out so I can hear myself talk. With the way and the intensity of anti-Semitism that we're facing in the West now, and the asinine level of media that we're receiving, and obviously very, very biased, how do we ensure that the messages that Israel needs to bring forward from our journalists can really make it to us in the diaspora?
I'm sorry, but I didn't hear the question.
Oh, pardon me.
You
didn't hear a question?
Could you, yeah.
It's more so asking about how the level of anti-Semitism in the West and the way that the media is very biased towards Israel. In terms of us receiving better messages from our own journalists in Israel, how can we ensure to grasp onto that rather than all the level of negativity that we see right now? Because it's just yes. Crazy.
Well, to be honest, there are a couple of things that when we talk about anti-Semitism, lots of it is on the social media. And I think the Jewish world, well, the numbers are against us. The Muslim world, including Muslims in Canada, 2 million Muslims in Canada right now. So if they are very active on social media, the Jewish community of 400,000 is not balanced with the Muslim. But I think being more active on social media is necessary. And I'm not sure, traveling in Canada, that people here are, because going to rallies, I'm not sure as much is helpful, to be honest. They're doing the pro-Hamas or anti-Israel rallies are all over Canada. I'm not sure the answer is by having a counter rally. But when we look at the social media, and it's very important also for the young generation, and we see there is a lot of work to do, and sometimes to fight back, and to be proud of what we are, and to, with all the lies that we hear and see on the social media, we shouldn't be quiet and let it go. I think there is way more to do on social media than, and I'm not talking only on the Canadian Jewish community. I'm talking about Israel supporters in Canada and out of Canada. I'm talking about Jewish communities around the world, not necessarily. And the Israelis, to be honest, they are so focused on their own security, they pay less attention about the anti-Semitism around the world. And there are reports. They know, they get the information, including when there are serious, severe incidents in Canada. They get the information, but they are so busy with the question, are they going to live a peaceful life in the future with what happened? Is it quiet, the agreement with Hezbollah? Could they go back to Kiryat Shmona and Metula in the north or not? So they read the paper and the media and they understand what's going on, but they are not very active in fighting anti-Semitism. And I think it's pity because they are so busy with their lives, and the government of Israel is obsessed with what's going on in Israel and less with what's going on with the Jewish world. That's a fact. And it's up to the people around the world to speak up and to be assertive and determined and proud and be there. And that's the work, by the way, we do in different universities here in Canada and in the States. We have emissaries of the Jewish Agency working with students not to be afraid to go with a Star of David necklace in the university and be proud of being Jewish and not being afraid. Because if we are afraid, that's the victory, those who hate us. And we don't want to be there. So being proud and not afraid and courageous, I think it's our time to speak up and to be there. That's my feeling. Yes. Who is next?
I've got a question for you in that regard. Since October 7th, there's been a tremendous loss of support for Israel from Western countries.
Right.
Jewish young people especially have a lot of difficulty with what's going on. What does Israel have to do to sort of regain this sort of respect, love and respect from Western countries, from young Jews? What is it that they have to do going forward? I know it's not an easy question.
It's a very good question. And I think Israel can do much more, but it's also up to the decision makers to prioritize that. And right now, the Israeli policy, as we see it, and I'm not a spokesperson of the government, but that the government of Israel right now works mainly to maintain the support of one person, who is President Trump. And we see that all the eggs are in the basket of the administration in the United States, for the good or for the bad. Let's look at the positive side. No European country was able to push through, get back the hostages with all due respect to all the European countries. No, for 2 years they spoke wonderfully, words. Even Biden administration was not one person was able to get back all the 20 hostages who are alive on one day, which was a very moving, exciting, happy, joyful day for the Israelis. Amazing. And 27 out of 28 bodies had returned. And it's all, and 2-3 weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C. in the General Assembly of the Jewish Federation in North America, and there were four hostages who were released. They opened the session, and they thanked the President of the United States. Nobody thanked the Prime Minister of Israel. Now, so having President Trump and the superpower of the United States on your side is not a bad thing. But at the same time, the policy is that the rest of the world is less important. That's the policy. That's the elected government. There are elections. It might change. But right now, as I see it, I don't see any change in the policy that the rest of the world is less important as long as, and we see that President Trump, he is also responsible for the ceasefire, for the good or for the bad. Israel didn't want or thought of going to a ceasefire without the pressure of the President of the United States. So if he is right now the influencer on Israel and the only one, you can't expect the Israelis to look for other parts of the world. And it might change if there is a new government in the foreseeable future. As I said, the polls show that there is a chance that there will be a new government which is not as right-wing as this government in Israel. But I don't see any change in the policy. Yes.
So my question is actually further to that. Whatever people think about Netanyahu, do you think that the Israeli electorate is being moved by the extreme positions of people like Ben Gvir and Smotrich?
I like talking about Israeli politics. Do you have another hour or two? Look, because of Prime Minister Netanyahu trial being charged on corruption, only the right-wing bloc supports him. So no party from the other side of the political spectrum was willing to support the coalition when he's on trial. Now, in the last elections 3 years ago, the right-wing side won the elections by 64 seats out of 120. We saw a shift to the right in the Israeli public following the disengagement in 2006. People said it was supposed to enhance the security, and we got rockets and missiles. This is not security. There was a shift to the right. We show a shift to the right with the failure of the Oslo Agreement. People thought that's the end of the war with the Palestinians, and we got explosive and suicide bombers in buses. So there was a shift in the 90s. It's a process of Israel become more and more rightist than it was. And once it becomes more and more rightist, we see the extreme right, but not only in Israel. Look at the politics, and also the extreme left as a counterproductive to. We see AOC, and Bernie Sanders. They were going to run, not Biden, the time of Biden is gone. And we see Trump, and we see Steve Bannon, his aide, and we see the far right voted for Trump where they are, and Trump himself. People in the US say this is an extreme right. This is not a President Bush, not the son, not the father, but the time of Biden, Clinton, and Obama probably gone too. So we see it also in Israel, that the extreme right takes more and more important positions and more influence. I don't see right now in the polls that this coalition is going to win. But in Israeli politics, never say never. So it's a long time till the elections. Either it's in June or in September. Last question. And then I want to finish with a joke. I see you are a little bit sad.
Okay, it's been almost 60 years since the victorious 1967 war that Israel won. Why in the world are we still hearing the words occupied territories?
Because according to the international law, it's not part of Israel. It's still occupied. You can say, I mean, it's also a political question. How do you call it? Some people in Israel call it the liberated territories. And some people call it just the territories. And there are who say this is an occupied territory. Now, Israel never decided to annex the territories. In Abraham Accord, there was an option that Israel will annex most of it for a Palestinian state on the rest of it. And Israel didn't agree, so Israel didn't annex the territories and didn't agree for a Palestinian state. So as long as this conflict going on, and by the way, no right-wing government never, ever canceled the Oslo Accord. And Netanyahu had lots of time to change that and to say, this accord between Israel and the Palestinian entity is over. He didn't do that for his own reasons. And with Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, the Oslo agreement is valid. We like it, we dislike it, we support it, we don't support it, it's still valid. So we see that sometimes right-wing government, and people sometimes forget that who disengaged from Gaza unilaterally? It wasn't a crazy leftist, it was the builder of the settlements, Ariel Sharon, who was the head of the Likud party when the Likud party decided to destroy the settlements and move away 8,500 settlers, Likud. And who signed the peace treaty with Egypt, who decided to give up the whole Sinai Peninsula for a peace treaty, was the crazy leftist Menachem Begin, who was the head of Likud party. So, and who didn't cancel the Oslo Accord? The leftist Netanyahu, who decided in the last 30 years that the Oslo Accord will be valid forever. How come? We see in democracies, especially in Israel, we have a recipe that you say one thing before the elections and do the opposite at the end of, after the elections. That's an Israeli recipe in politics. Not only from the right, also from the left. The campaign is A, then you sit down and Prime Minister Sharon was very articulate saying things you see from here, you don't see from anywhere else. In Hebrew, דברים שרואים מפה, לא רואים משם. When I'm in the Prime Minister's office, I see things globally. I don't see only the campaign as I am the leader of the opposition. And it works both ways, and we see it. So I think there won't be, and it's a very good question, I don't see any change in the terminology or in the status of, and some people call it Judea and Samaria, or West Bank, depends which political line do you take. But according to international community, it hasn't been annexed to any country. It's not Jordanian, and it's not Israeli, so it's the territories. When I was a journalist, I just called it the territories, not the occupied territories, not the liberated territories, not the West Bank, not Judea and Samaria, just the territories. It's more natural. That's the feeling I had. Let me finish with a joke, if it's okay.
Yeah, our rabbi does that all the time.
Yes? Oh, really? I didn't know. I know one person. I start with a joke. Okay, well, I'll tell you a joke. I know Jeff heard the joke, so don't tell the end of the joke. Don't destroy the punchline. Because of the situation, God decides to destroy the world. He doesn't like what's going on, and he calls 3 prominent leaders to let them know in person his decision. He calls President Trump, President Putin of Russia, and the Prime Minister of the chosen people, Prime Minister Netanyahu, to come in person, and he tells them, guys, I'm not happy. This is not what I planned. and I decided to destroy the world, and you have my permission to let your people know. President Trump comes to the joint session of the two houses of Congress. My fellow Americans, I have one good news and one bad news. The good news is God exists. I told you I'm a believer and I met God. God exists. This is wonderful news. The bad news, he's fed up with us and he's going to destroy the world. The Russian president come to the Duma, the Russian parliament. Comrades, I have two bad news. First, God exists. It's a very bad news because I thought it doesn't exist at all. And I met him in person. Secondly, he's going to destroy us all. The whole world, not only the Russians. And not because of Ukraine. Prime Minister Netanyahu come to the Knesset, to the Israeli parliament, very confident, and he asked for the primetime TV because he likes to tell the Israelis, not only in the parliament, Israeli friends, he says, I have two good news to announce today. First is God exists. We are the chosen people. We believe in God. I met God in person. It's a wonderful news. And the second great news I have to announce, be sure there will never, ever be a Palestinian state. Thank you very much for having me tonight. It was a pleasure coming to Winnipeg, and I wish you all the best. Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you all for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you, and I invite you back on Shabbat morning to celebrate donorship this Shabbat at 10 a.m., followed by a wonderful Kiddush. Thank you.